Okay, in this video we're going to be talking about getting beer by ID. So the challenge of this one is you can see in the path there in the top right side of the screen, you have API/v1/beer and then beer ID. So that is a path parameter. So we need to capture that random value from the path in our controller mapping. So I'm going to toggle over to IntelliJ now and show you exactly how to implement that. So I've toggled over to IntelliJ, and we previously defined the getBeerById method. So you can see here on line 27, we did this previously in the course. So I'm going to take the request mapping here, copy that down, and now what we want to do is set this up, that request mapping to be set up to take in a path parameter. So to do that, we're going to do slash curly bracket beer ID, and then closing bracket. So that sets up the request mapping. That's how Spring is going to detect that path component. Now the next thing that we need to do is, if we do just beer ID like so, I think Spring will match the two values. So by default it will do that. I believe so, but don't rely on that. So what you want to do here is use annotation for path variable. So that's what we're doing. We're extracting a path variable. And with that ID like that, I believe those will match based on the variable name, but I don't like to depend on that because you are going by a convention. So you can explicitly say beer ID with the path variable. It will do variable name matching. I think it's just more readable and makes more sense to do it this way like that. Now, a couple other things that we want to change here. So right now, we have two properties here that are utilizing API v1 beer. So what we can do is come up here and refactor this. We say request mapping, and here we can say /API. So this sets up a base mapping for every method in this. So we should start with a slash there. And now this doesn't need to have that value, but we can say method request method get, because without limiting to get, that method be invoked for any HTTP action. So we don't want that. And then also on this one specifically, we want that path variable, and we also want to limit it to using the get method, because if we passed in something else, another HTTP method, that would invoke on us. So we only want getBeerById to be working for the HTTP GET request. So this is up and running. Let's go ahead and refresh this. You can see that we've started there. And I'm going to come into services and see here. We have this getBeerById, or v1. And if I run this, now we can see, because remember, these UIDs are going to change every time we start or restart the application server. Those are generated at random, but they're being stored in that map. So I can grab one of these UIDs, and up here, I can change that path, pass in the UID value. That is a string, and Spring will convert that to a Java UID through binding. And we got an error saying that's not found. I'm going to double check this. So we're still getting a not found there. So I'm going to pause this and investigate and see what I missed here. Okay, pause the video for a second, and I actually saw my mistake right away. So when I refactored to use the request mapping at the class level, I made a mistake here. So I set up the first method correctly, but effectively I was the way it's set up now, the path would be API v1 beer, then API v1 beer again. So this part, because I specified it here, this can go away. So I can just get rid of that. And now my request mapping comes by beer ID. So if I go ahead and restart Spring, see that we come back up pretty quick. And here, I need to test this. Remember, the UID values are going to change every time we restart Spring. And we can't have a trailing slash there. That's an easy mistake to make. And now If I come in, let's grab Sunshine City, and I come up here, say slash, give it that value. So remember, that's going to be generated each time. And I missed the E. So I missed that trailing E there on the copy. Now I run, and we can see that the response that I get back is a single JSON object for the beer representation. So let me minimize this. So what we changed in the beer controller, just to recap that, we added a request mapping at the class level. So at the class level, now we're saying API v1 beer. And then we had our existing method there, get beer by ID, but we added in the request mapping. And because we have the prefix of the path at the class level, we just have to do beer ID. And then on both of our methods, we are limiting them to get requests. So if we run some type of other HTTP request against this controller will not act on any others other than gets. So that's going to become more and more important as we flesh out the rest of the actions of this controller.